Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of The Emerging Composer with your host. That'd be me, Paige Garwood. And today we're going to continue on in episode 2 of our 5-part series on the circle of fifths, the major scale, and chords. So last episode, we talked about drawing the circle of fifths and deciphering what those key signature things mean. And we began to talk about how to find the notes of a major scale. Well, we're going to build on that in this episode. And by the end of this episode, you should have the knowledge necessary to write out all of the 12 major scales. And we're going to begin to talk a little bit how chords fit into this whole thing. So, one reminder, you can purchase the workbook that goes with all 5 of these episodes for $12. That workbook will contain every slide that you're going to see in these presentations. And if you are listening to the audio-only podcast version of these things, then you really will need the workbook to follow along, because this is a very visually intensive podcast. So, having said that, let's launch right into Chapter 2. All right, Chapter 2, the chords of the major scale. Using the method we just learned in Chapter 1, let's write out the names of the notes of the G major scale again, just like we did before. In fact, I would recommend that you draw the circle of fifths again, just to get used to drawing it. Eventually, it'll become second nature. It'll just be in your skull. You won't have to put it down on paper. But for the time being, as you're getting used to this, I would draw out the major scale in the circle of fifths as many times as possible, just to get it in your head. All right, so we got the circle of fifths. We've drawn out the notes or written the notes of the G major scale, just like you see. And we know that there are 7 notes in the major scale, correct? Each note name is also the name of the chord built on that note. So the first note of the G scale, well, it's a G. The chord built in that note name will be G major or G minor. So which chords are major or minor? I'm so glad you asked. By the way, have you noticed the new principle we added here? We put numbers under the notes. That's important. We'll talk about that in the next slide. 1, 4, and 5 chords are major. I've got them highlighted in red here. You see, we labeled the scale notes with numbers because there's 12 major scales to deal with. Rather than memorize 12 sets of letters with sharps and flats and all that kind of stuff, we use numbers because the principles of the major scale are the same no matter what major scale you're dealing with. So if we just use numbers, then we can just learn the concept of which number chords are major, which number chords are minor. And then we can figure out what those other keys are by using the circle of fifths. So 1, 4, and 5 are major. Makes sense. G is the first note of the G major scale, so that would be number 1. Notice that C is 4 and D is 5. Everybody else is minor. Not exactly. Yes and no. The 7th chord is really diminished. 2, 3, and 6 are minor. 7th chord is really diminished. But why do I say 1, 4, 5 major, everybody else is minor? Well, it's because this diminished chord is an altered minor chord. It belongs in the minor chord family. And I discovered when I was teaching this in the classroom, if I'd say 1, 4, 5 is major, 2, 3, 6 minor, 7 is diminished. For some reason, having to remember those 3 things caused some problems among some of my students. Not all, but some. And so what I started doing was 1, 4, 5 is major, everybody else is minor, because everybody can remember just 2 things. 1, 4, 5 is major, everybody else is minor. Oh, except for that weirdo 7, he's diminished. And for some reason, they would latch onto that. So if I would ask them, which chords are major, which chords are minor, they'd say, 1, 4, 5 is major. Everybody else is minor. Oh yeah, the weirdo 7, he's diminished. They remembered that. By the way, the diminished chord, you don't see it a lot in pop music. You see it a lot more in classical and jazz, perhaps. It's got a very mysterious sound to it, and it's an odd little chord. It's kind of like that odd little relative that every family has. You can handle them in short bits, but not for long, extended periods of time. If you don't know who that odd member of your family is, be open to the fact that maybe you're that odd person. That's me and my family. 1-4-5 major. Everybody else is minor, except for that weirdo 7. He's diminished. Now, we're not done with the circle yet. Let's say you can't remember that 1-4-5's major. Let's just say that that's too much information for you. Well, you can figure it out real easy with the circle of fifths. Write out this G major scale like we've been doing. Now look at the circle. I've got G circle because that's a key we're in, right? Yeah. I'm going to put the number 1 there. That's the 1 chord. Now go 1 click left. What letter do you see there? C. That's your 4 chord. Go back to your G. Go 1 click clockwise or right. What's there? The letter D. That's your 5 chord. So not only does it tell you what keys are, but you can use it to determine what 1, 4, and 5 and any key is. Find the 1 chord on the circle and go 1 click counterclockwise. There's your 4 chord. 1 click clockwise. There's your 5 chord. You can circle them, highlight them, underline them, however you want, and realize that everybody else is minor except for that weirdo 7. It's diminished. That makes sense? Cool. Now, here's a worksheet. Using the circle of fifths and what we've just discussed, fill in every chord for the keys that have sharps in them. I've done the key of C for you, and you notice I've got everything in columns. And I've got like a lowercase m that you're going to put next to each chord that's minor. And you're going to leave the major chords by themselves. You don't have to put anything next to them. And then the 7 chord, that weirdo guy, you'll put like a lowercase small 0. That means diminished. So 1, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4, 5, 6 minor, 7 diminished. In the key of C, that would be C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished. Now fill in the rest of these for the sharp keys. And likewise, do the very same thing for the flat keys. Does that make sense? Cool. Well, guess what? That's all there is in Chapter 2. So Chapter 3, we're going to be talking about related major and minor chords. We're going to talk about related major, minor pentatonic scales. It gets really cool here. All right? We're going to stop right there for right now. Remember, you can get your workbooks for these podcasts, all 5 of them, for $12. Email me at ffog@me.com or page@emergingcomposer.com. $12. I'll send you my PayPal information. You'll send me the money, and I'll email you the workbook. All right? This is Paige. I'm out of here. Have a great day. Bye-bye.